started this institute. And yay!
Still going strong.
Yeah, it's still going strong. It's such an exciting thing to see. So I wanted to start it a little bit about bragging about my dad. And then I'm gonna do a short interview with him to ask him some questions about the beginnings of this. It's very interesting. I have the first year booklet, and it's very interesting to see that the schedule is still virtually the same now. So it really stood the test of time. It's really very cool. Like, recitals are still at 4, and we still start at 8 a.m. for classes and things like that, so that's really fun. So we're in a transition time with our music school here, which was the very first thing that happened before the Institute rose. And I have had the good fortune and not so good fortune of sorting all the stuff in the building along with my sister Jennifer and my other sister and a lot of help. And one of my big duties was sorting through all my dad's papers. And I want to say, first of all, he's very organized. So everything in the drawers, they were in the right drawers, and they were what they said they were going to be. There's a drawer that's letters from Janice Butler. There's a drawer that's all the rest of his correspondence. There's a drawer, like, it's unbelievably, amazingly organized. But more than that, what really has struck us is how prolific my dad has been in his years. It's a phenomenal thing to see all that he has done for the Suzuki movement in this country, for this region, and then as I look out, also in Mexico, and in Canada, quite a bit in Canada too. So I became more and more and more proud of my dad as I cleaned out his stuff and tried to figure out what was really important to save, what people would want to see later, and what we just had to put in recycling. And it's been one of the most bittersweet times of my life doing this. Yeah, really special. So I thought that I would start by reading some statistics of the first institute that Sarah Cummings organized for me. Thank you, Sarah. The very first year, which we're going to hear about how it started and everything in a couple of minutes, but the very first year we actually had 429 students. There were 323 violin students, 38 chamber students, 22 cellists, and 46 pianos. That was in the day that we had a piano component at this institute. We had 78 teacher trainees, so people who were training. The first concert was held in the big gym. That's not the gym of today. That building didn't exist yet. But if you are on the upper floor and you're at the circle and you're walking towards the big parking lot, the building on your right is also a gym. And there's a very large gymnasium in there where we had that first concert. Some of the more well-known students are Brandon Vamos, who's the cellist in the Pacifica Quartet, and Helen Cole, who's the violinist in the New Zealand Quartet, and she's been back a number of times to play here. Somehow my name's down there too. I'm like, what's famous about me? Let's get that. And Judy Bossois at the time was doing, tell me if I'm right, you were doing teacher training and you were an office assistant.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Until they needed, there were too many children for the room, and Mary Kay, I was supposed to assist Mary Kay.
That's Mary Kay Neal from Buffalo.
But the room was so small, parents and children couldn't fit in there. So I was given the easiest job anyone ever has, and that is deal with just the children who had box violins. So we
Welcome to the
practiced
world
in the
of
hallway.
Wow. And then there were a lot of faculty members, some still living today, many not. And I think it's worth it for me to just buzz right through this list because I know some of you, this won't mean a thing, but some of us will go, oh, I remember her. So I think it's worth it. Eleanor Allen from Lawrence, Kansas. Louise Barrand, Carol Bigler, Mark Bjork, Jan Butler, who's right here. Raise your hand, Jan. Sylvia Edmonds from Massachusetts. Lorraine Fink, Alfred Garson, Pamela Gerhardt, Andre Gutmanis, Rudy Pazuka, Einar Holm, Anastasia Gempelis, John Kendall, Harry Kobiaka, Linda Ware McCrory. She has a different last name now. Terry Marcus. Kathy Mansour. Catherine. Mary Kay Neal. Kay Nicholas. Eleanor Osborne. Connie Pinnell. Glenn Pinnell, who was, Dad will tell you about how he was involved. Doris Pusso, Joan Reuning, Sandy Reuning, Catherine Schatz, Susan Shields, Jean Schweitzer, Yvonne Tate, Diana Tilson, Sue Vasquez, and that's it.
Wow.
So that was a big faculty for the very first institute here in Ithaca, New York.
John Kendall.
I did read
Not
his
Bill
name.
Starr.
He wasn't on there, no, I don't remember why he couldn't come. So I thought we'd start by sort of setting the stage a little bit about even before the first institutes. I love hearing my dad talk about sort of the state of music education in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and a meeting that you went
Okay.
to.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, it was, only way I could say it was pretty grim. And, you know, he didn't start kids till they were 14 years old or 12 years old or something like that. So you can imagine what kind of young players we had, not so good. And up north of here in Syracuse was a violinist, a very famous violinist who taught at Syracuse University, Louis Krasner. And Louis had sort of an international career of performing and studying, and was very well connected with the Boston Symphony. And so the Boston Symphony, and I think it was Eric Reinsdorf, decided to sponsor a summer seminar kind of thing to try to see what's going on, what can we do to get more good players in the orchestra, get more good students started. And so they had a big powwow at Tanglewood, which Joan and I went to. And we got to talk about this man we had just met the year before, Suzuki, and what this could mean to string production, string students teaching, and look what's happened. I mean, the Suzuki world changed string playing, and now I'll bet if you go and look at the orchestra, the Boston Symphony, or any other orchestra, and you just went in and say, everybody here that studied Suzuki as a kid, raise your hand, and you would see lots of hands go. So we really made an impact we should all be surprised, not surprised. And the impact we also should be so proud of that we've been part of this, right?
Yeah, when he first went to that meeting, they were really feeling like orchestras in the United States were about to fall apart because there were not enough string players showing up for auditions. And now, now there are plenty of string players showing up for the auditions. Yeah.
Your
So-
audition now would be, I don't know, maybe you can tell me, how many,
You know, how many people show up at the Boston Symphony for the violin opening? 200 maybe? I don't even have any idea.
I know the New York Film just did an audition for cello, and there were 15,000 applicants. I did not hire anybody. It was a no hire.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So ridiculous, so ridiculous. But I find that very interesting. If we just put this in context, that is, Suzuki first came to this country with his tour group in 1964. So that is only a little bit more than 60 years. And in the scheme of things, that is not very long to completely change the educational system. So I'm so curious, I know the first institute was in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, called the American Suzuki Institute. And all I really know is that Marge Aber started it, and it was modeled on the summer school idea from Matsumoto, Japan, where Suzuki lived. Do you know?
she
can you
was,
give
she was
insight to
the
that?
first to be, no, she had a vision of what to do and how to do it, and she did it. And Joan and I went there with our kids and taught for several years.
And can I just say, I just want to put this in context. This was before internet, way before internet. And how she reached out to all of those people is still a huge mystery to me, that she gathered all these people at this institute.
And I was hired on the spot because she had hired the teachers for her first institute. And there were not enough teachers hired to take care of the clientele that showed up. So she's, Sandy, come on, help us out. So we did, and then we went back several years until some people around said, why don't we start one in the Northeast so we don't have to travel way out to Wisconsin to take care of this. And the same way they said to, no, I forget her name,
Alice Joy Lewis.
Alice Joy Lewis.
Is that who you wanted to?
Yeah, the person.
She's in Ottawa. She was in Ottawa, Kansas.
And so Ithaca and Ottawa started the same year.
How many are this year? You said we started with 429. How many students are attending this year?
Do you know?
So we have about, last week we had about 175 under DD, and this week it's more like 135 or something.
Now, the next question is, how many of these institutes exist all over the country? You know, that's a really huge change, you know. So anyway, Ottawa, in the Midwest, Ithaca in the Northeast,
And
Stevens Point, Wisconsin, that was it.
I'm terrible with dates, but I feel like it was about 4 years later.
Yeah, maybe.
And what I always do is I talk to myself about what age I was. So I feel like my first year at Stevens Point, I was 12. And I feel like my first year at this institute, I was almost 16.
Okay.
So that's how I do it, but this is not a good mathematical way of doing it. So take
Yeah, 'cause they had their
any of the
50th
dates.
They had their 50th during, so 2020
Yeah, that's right.
is gonna be their 50th, and they put it on the year because of.
That's right.
Did you know about Forest
the way
Grove in
mine-
Oregon?
No, we don't. we don't think about Oregon, it's way too far away. No, is that another
There was an
institute?
institute at Forest Grove in Oregon that I went to in my single digits, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
And the National Cello Institute also, started when I was only 8.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we should do a little bit more digging to see,
Yeah.
because,
There was stuff going on the West Coast as well.
Yeah. yeah, and again, that time period, we didn't necessarily hear much about the other regions that we weren't a part of.
Mhm.
And it could be that the Oregon people didn't hear about us
Right.
much too either. Yeah, very interesting.
Okay, the way my memory works, and I'm sure for some of you works the same way, the things that happened that weren't so nice, I remember.
The good stories, yeah, but we're not telling them yet. We need to set the stage first. We need to set the stage for how this one, how did you get this one off the ground?
Okay. So there were teachers from the Northeast area at Stevens Point, and they just suddenly all met together and said, Sandy, I don't know why they picked me. Why don't you start an institute in the Northeast? And we'll help. We'll bring our students. We'll pitch in, you know. So I thought about it and approached a fellow here that he's long gone now to the college, because I don't think the college had ever hosted anything like this before. This was something quite new, especially when it involves little children, you know. So anyway, I decided, okay, the best way to do this is get everybody's ideas. So we met in a nice hotel in Hudson Falls, New York, and I invited all these teachers that had spoken to me from around the Northeast to come there. And they had to pay their own way, that's okay. And we had a nice weekend there, and we just brainstormed the whole thing. And the result was this kind of institute, which was a little different in a number of ways from Stevens Point. I like to say better, but it was just different, you know. We had a little more. The main thing I remember as being radically different is the way we did teacher training. We had regular teacher courses and met every day with the same trainer who had in many ways been to Japan and studied directly with Dr. Suzuki, so we could continue the legacy. Stevens Point was looser.
In the beginning years.
Yeah, and I can remember the teacher training out there in the beginning years was mainly just going and observing all the teaching that was going on. And then we had a big meeting at the end of the week, and Marjorie says, does anybody have any questions? And this one has stuck in my mind forever. This fellow in the back put his hand up.
He's not here.
What is this that I keep hearing about listening?
So I'm just gonna say, I don't think this was anything against Stevens Point. Stevens Point was just bringing people together. And then, this isn't really part of this whole discussion, but then the teachers who were active started banding together and coming up with a teacher training plan. So it wasn't that Stevens Point wasn't doing it, and then Ithaca was. The
Well,
plan
that's
was
because-
starting to become in place.
That's because Marjorie had, what's the word, made her institute very much like Matsumoto. And in Matsumoto Institute, there was nothing for teachers in training. You went to Matsumoto during the year to train Suzuki now with Dr. Suzuki. So during the summer school in Osmodo, it was for kids, it wasn't for the teachers per se, it was for the kids. So, bless her heart.
So now all the institutes work more this way. Did you want to tell them about Glenn Pinnell?
I will. So, everybody asked me, can we do this in Ithaca? I said, oh. So I had a teacher that was working with me, Connie Pinnell, and her husband was Glenn, and he was a Boy Scout executive. Ended up as one of the top executives in Texas, actually. So I said to Glenn, I said, I know you have so many skills that I don't have. I said, if you'll help me do this, together we could start an institute. And he agreed to do it. And it was the two of us as co-directors that actually started the first institute.
Yeah, and I hadn't realized it, but Dad said to me recently, he said if Glenn had not said yes, this may not have started. Because he had 4 kids, they had just bought a new building. Right, Jan, how did the ITE building relate to the first institute? Do you remember, like rent, time-wise? I was trying to figure this out. Was it about a year apart?
We moved here in '76, and he was already being used.
Yeah, so it was around the same time period where he bought the mansion that's on the edge of Ithaca College and turned it into a music school. So it was a lot, you were doing, a lot was going on, and then somewhere in there, you were president of the SAA, and like, I can't even believe how much he and my mom did. It's exhausting to read about, or to have lived.
You're making me tired.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to save some time also for some stories from the audience, but do you want to share a couple stories that, but maybe think hard before you share them? I'm worried about which stories you're going to tell. Carefully. Because there's some really crazy stories about the early.
Just go with the.
Yeah, okay. We're just going right with it. Now I've got him worried.
Well, I'm gonna tell her anyway. All right, we're registering people coming into the campus for the first time. And everything seems to be going okay. Yeah, okay so far. 2 or 3 couples come back. We don't have any mattress in our dorm room. We don't have any sheets. We don't have any pillowcases. We don't have any pillows. Oh my gosh. So anyway, that's why I have Glenn Pinnell, I said, hey Glenn, I think this is your department. I'm musical director. So he and my son, Chris, who was 16 maybe, or something like that. 15. They got, now this is a Sunday. What happens on a college campus? In the summer, on Sunday, there's no people around, so they had to get security, actually, to open the closets where the mattresses were kept, and the sheets, and the pillowcases. And my son, Chris, and Glenn Pinnell had to lug these things, such and such in this dorm, such and such in that dorm, until we had it all settled by nighttime. That's a horror story. They wouldn't want to relive or have any institute relive.
Do you have any others?
Remember the abandoned building?
What?
The abandoned
No, why don't you tell it, Terry? So before Terry tells us, I think, Terry, is my memory right that you and David were dorm counselors?
Yes.
Because really all I remember about that year is how fun that was in the dorm.
We were the chamber music dorm
Yeah.
counselors that we coached the next morning after they had stayed up all night. And we were trying to get them to go to sleep,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't, of course, as to have fun, right? But then we were so mad at them that we,
Yeah.
it's really hard to be motivating to them. Well, if you had gone to sleep, maybe you'd even play this. But was it after Glenn Pennell that David became the assistant director? And I just remember him coming back and saying, "You're not going to believe this," because they were using the apartments down on Coddington Road. There were apartments that Ithaca College owned, so some of the families were staying in these apartments, and apparently, family got the key, tried to open the door, and they heard this dog barking in the apartment that had been abandoned. So they walked in, and there's this, they don't even know how long that dog had been in that apartment.
Oh, that's so awful.
Awful, really awful.
Which reminds me of another family who came with a dog in the dorms, and they all came with chicken pox. Yeah, yeah. So it's sort of like a pre-COVID story. Come and contaminate the whole institute. Yeah.
Then we had a teacher trainer who disappeared. On his door, the auditorium door, got the security open. She didn't come to class.
Oh, trainee?
No,
Oh, I thought you said trainer. Yeah, okay.
trainee. And he just disappeared. Took off. Didn't want to be here, I guess. Well, you worry, you know, what happened to him?
Did you ever find out?
Day, we
No.
don't know.
What about the cheese story?
Cheese story. Oh, the nun? Oh, that's a pretty cute story.
Oh, boy, yeah. John Kendall had been to Brazil a number of times. And he met Sister,
It was a man's name.
anyway. So he said, you should come to Ithaca, to the Institute now. You know, she'd been teaching a couple of years. So she got friends together, I guess, to be set up here. And after being in the dorm and in the classroom for several days, the office staff became very concerned about her health. She had this odor that was emanating the room when she came in. And so they made a call down to the convent and said, Sister so-and-so, who was here at our institute, we're concerned about her health. She has this odor that is
Okay.
well, it turns out she had come all the way from Brazil. And I think she kind of wangled her way in here by saying God will provide. And didn't even pay
Tuition or anything.
Tuition.
Right.
And she brought this huge hunk of cheese. Well aged, I'm still aging.
It was like Limburger, like it was a real potent, yeah.
So
That's what she was living
That
off
was
of.
what she was living off of. She didn't go to the dining hall or anything like that. She had this.
Okay, you can see why I get a little nervous. We've been pretty good though, so I think we're gonna turn it over to somebody.
The administration decides we should have a beautiful boat ride around the lake. And we got on the boat, it was a little
It's a
question.
dinner cruise, right?
No, there was no dinner on it. There was no dinner, sorry. We were on the boat. We were on the boat.
But it's a big boat.
Yeah, it was a big boat. And it was full of Suzuki method people. The people were there. And at one point, a storm came up. And the lady who was controlling the boat couldn't get it out of the storm and off to the side. And, I mean, I remember things like Sister Helen Ann sitting there and doing her rosary. I remember, another family who had said to the wife and husband talking is, we're wondering if there's enough life preservers around. And they were talking to each other, well, at least we left our daughter at my brother's house. I mean, it was really serious.
It was
Mark the Lord.
very stormy. And she couldn't dock back at the entry where
Yeah.
we left from. Yeah. So we just around.
It was really awful and slightly scary, like
Yeah.
more than slightly scary.
Yeah.
And
So
we
we-
could have lost the whole
Yeah.
Suzuki.
It really was, it's actually very true, that was the core group of Suzuki and the Americas were on that boat. Yeah. Yeah, so. What other stories?
Well, I'm gonna take up on, you said some people remember the bad things. I'm just gonna recount how much better it is now as far as facilities go. Because we used to stay in the dorms that were un-air conditioned, and we would teach in the same dorm. And you'd have to open, well, we felt like we had to open the windows to let some air flow through, because we still had, you know, they would take out the beds and they just put the chairs, so there'd be 4 students, 4 parents, anybody observing the room. And so we'd have the windows open, but invariably, the people taking care of the maintenance of the grounds would go to the dorm rooms that had the windows open and start either mowing the lawn or using their weed whackers. So here we are trying to work on tone, and all you hear is and
Yeah,
it was
and
challenging.
that heat, there's nothing like the heat of an Ithaca summer in one of those small dorm rooms.
Well, if you can imagine teaching this past week,
Yeah.
or last week,
Right.
in one of those
Can't
rooms.
imagine that.
Right.
In science, that sometimes things never change. The lawnmower was going during my class yesterday.
Yeah.
And during mine this morning.
Yep.
I think one of the most difficult years was the year when they were adding on to this building. And we had a lot of the classes in this building. And I remember jackhammers going on the ceiling of the room that where my kids' lessons were being held. And it was very difficult.
That happened last week in Fort Hall. So,
Stop, did it?
yeah, we're just going full circle for the 50th.
We had one, I'm not sure whether this was an institute or our music school concert over in one of the other buildings. What do you call it?
Dillingham.
Dillingham.
Yeah,
Corner.
Dillingham or something. And we had an outage, electrical outage. So here we are with the orchestra on stage and all the lights went out. What do we do?
play from memory.
Cell phones, parents with cell phones came out. Put the cell phone on your music stand like that, shine it so you could see the music. And we had the concert.
That was the New Zealand String Quartet. Wasn't it?
Oh, that's right.
Wasn't that the New Zealand String Quartet maybe like 10 years ago?
Is that already the string quartet?
I mean, there was a power outage
I
during
think that
that.
happened more than once. I think
Yeah.
they kept, I think they just kept playing.
What I remember is having a stage full of kids, all having studied Suzuki method, all having studied Suzuki's tone. And what I heard, it felt like, as a director of this ensemble, just so magnificent, so different from my early experience of teaching. And I had a very, very good teacher when I was young. I had very good orchestras when I first started teaching.
Should we?
You're talking too
No,
much.
you're not, oh.
Says you're talking too much.
Here, can I just turn that off for you? Well, it is off. So I don't know why that rang. Did you already turn it off?
Now you all know how up on electronics I am. I pride myself in being a dinosaur. Okay.
Carrie, do you want to introduce the other?
Yeah, maybe you all could introduce yourselves and say a little something. Jan, why don't you say your sort of situation of when you moved here and sort of did, that would be cool to hear about your family.
I'm Jane Butler. I have 2 children. I first met Sandy and Joan and Carrie and Jennifer and Belinda and Chris was there too. We met one of the workshops that Louis Kreisner did. Louis Kreisner.
Where did we meet?
At a workshop with Louis Krasner.
Yeah, well, wasn't Suzuki there too?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
I'm talking about, that's when we met you, that's when I met you, and Joan and your children,
Yep.
and Dr. Suzuki.
Yeah, we had the privilege of having our children already, the few kids in the Northeast that had studied. And so everywhere Suzuki went to do things, at Eastman or Syracuse or wherever, we usually took our kids and had them be his demonstrators.
And when I heard those kids play, I almost fell off the chair, because I never heard such a mature tone, such a beautiful tone coming from children. And I was hooked right there. That was the second time, I believe, that Mr. Krasner had the second year, 2 times, right? And it was the second time. I was very fortunate to do that. That's how this all started for me.
And then you moved here with your family.
Yes, here in 1976.
And we gave Jan a job. She's been a #1 teacher all these years.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
That's how I got it. It's been wonderful, Sandy.
And then my sister Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Myers, Reuning-Myers.
So my first year, Melinda was my roommate, and she had been away for, traveling for a year, so we got reconnected and been fast friends ever since. I think that the thing that was life-changing about the first institute for me is that it had chamber music, and that's where my love of chamber music really blossomed. And many years, I think all the way through high school, the chamber music program. So maybe someday I'll be back.
I used to think about it all year, like, oh, only 9 months left till
Yeah.
institute.
Yeah. And my best friends I still are from that time through chamber music. Very life-changing for me, friendship-wise and music-wise.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to know where the friendship and the music starts and stops. I can remember one key time, maybe going to that workshop that you saw, Jan, where we were, my violin, and I went, I hate to say this. I had totally forgotten my violin because I was so excited to see my friends. So we had to turn around. It probably wasn't for that because, you know, I didn't have friends to see there, but yeah, that was not very liked. And Belinda, did you want to say something more?
I think, yeah, I just fell in love with chamber music my first year. Actually, you had an institute at your house on Buttermilk Falls Road.
Yeah, we had a camp.
A test run, and it was chamber music down there too.
Yeah.
It was like a year or two before that. And I just thought that was really cool. I was in an emergency quartet, emergency chamber music group, that's what I call it now. And we put kids who really don't know what they're doing, so there's 2 on a part. Dave Mantel was my coach, Helen Cole was my coach.
Helen was in the emergency group with Melinda. And the reason she could play without the lights for that concert is because her ears were so good from not reading real great when she was little. Just want to say.
I didn't catch this.
Melinda and Helen were both in the emergency quartet for people whose reading isn't quite strong,
Up to snuff.
up to snuff. Helen was in that with
We had
Melinda.
double 2 people in the car, she was probably the strongest.
Now, I want to remember.
I'm really
Well, all
not
3
trying
of
to
these-
take up the whole thing.
All 3 of these young women here were my very first students. And thank you for coming. But I remember one high school orchestra concert. And everybody comes on stage and here's,
This is when I didn't know my music.
here's the first stand players. Well, the concertmaster had come out yet.
No, I was the
They
concertmaster.
So they go off stage.
No, I
And
just
then they
forgot
come
the
on back
music.
on stage. And then they go off stage again. And then pretty soon it's pretty obvious that they don't have their music. So they just come back on stage, sit down, and play the whole concert from memory. Suzuki memory.
Yay, I forgot my music.
And, you know,
Well, that's probably because you weren't sleeping and David Einfeld was yelling at you.
it just happens, you know, when you sit in a situation like that for a number of weeks and weeks, you know, you just, with this kind of memory that we develop here, it's gonna be there, you can't help it. Who needs music?
And then we have Rima Bruins here, who was also, as my dad said, one of the very first students.
Yeah, and I just figured out today that I actually predate this whole thing, that I thought we were talking about the first institute that was at Buttermilk at your home. I never came to a Suzuki Institute in college. but yes, I was not the first student. Carrie was already playing for a couple of years before I started, but actually maybe only 1 year. I think I was in the second class. I do remember the new Crosman, but it's pre-institute days. Somehow a bunch of us went,
Yeah.
what did you say, we were demos?
Yeah, we went to play in his workshops when Suzuki was there. Yeah.
So I was at most 7, and he followed my mother and me out to the parking lot afterwards. And she didn't actually know who it was, there was just this man following us, and we were just the two of us, and she was very scared. Finally, he came up and introduced himself and told her that the reason he was following us is that he wanted her to give me to him to come live in Syracuse and study with him there. He said his wife makes great pasta.
So he was poaching.
He was
Trying to poach the
He
student.
tried-
Yeah, it's
I
funny.
was a little yelling to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
She wasn't having anything on it.
And then, and Tal, you were at the first,
Yeah, I was
Institute.
at the first long hair up to her butt, and that was Linda, was now Linda Fury, right? And I thought my group teacher, you don't have her, you didn't mention the list. Did you mention Nancy Tennessee? Wasn't she here? She was not here?
she was a bit later, I believe.
Second year.
Second
Oh, then
year?
it was not, then somebody else
As
was my
teacher
group
trainer.
teacher with long hair too. Maybe it was Linda was my group teacher as well, I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember, speaking about reading, orchestra with Pamela Gerhardt playing, I think maybe it was Vivaldi Concerto in A minor for 2 violins. Didn't have a clue about reading. I was, what are they doing looking at the page there? But by the concert time, I had memorized, just from listening to it. So I was right in sync. You know, at that time, reading was not as much a priority in Suzuki as it is now. And my fondest recollection was not playing a recital, but learning how to swim in the outdoor pool, which had not changed. It looked the same to me, that fence around the pool line. Right, was that
Just
there
the
before the
same.
fitness center by
Yes.
itself?
Oh, yes.
Yes, 'cause I don't remember a fitness center.
No.
I remember a pool and a diving board.
That pool was the best.
Yeah, so that was my limited recollection of it.
You were cute. He had little shorts and playing at his recital.
Pencils.
Little, yeah.
You're gonna see that picture later on today.
Oh. Yeah. So, how many years, this is a terrible question to ask because we're not gonna know the answer, but maybe Sarah and Natalie can help. How many years were you director? I'm just curious, if this is the 50th year, and I took it for a couple of years, what was that? How many years have been?
40.
40 years. Yeah.
43, I just did the math.
43, thank
Yeah,
you.
74 to 17.
Yeah, that's a big legacy. Yeah.
I think you don't watch, so I'm just saying.
There's a surprise every year. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Was there anybody else who had anything left to say before we disband here and go see what's next? That work at the travel
I just want to
conference.
say one thing positive, because I feel like they only said negative things. But, you know, every year when I come here, I just can't wait for the recitals and the concerts at night. And this year, of course, did not disappoint. And when, you know, you go home with new standards and new expectations for your students, and you just watch these kids play, and it's just so amazing. I mean, to me, this is where some of the finest playing is. And just to come back every year and hear that, what I call the Ithaca sound, and to hear how it's been generated and forwarded and passed on, you know, and to come back and meet the parents who I used to teach at this institute, who brought their kids back. It's just such an uplifting experience, you know, in all these 50 years. It's like a regeneration, a rejuvenation.
Yeah.
So, thank
And,
you.
and I want to underline what it feels like to teach the children of the children that you taught. It's amazing. It's as good as being a grandmother, as being a Suzuki grandmother. It's amazing. Is anybody a Suzuki great grandmother yet? I don't think some of us are maybe far. I mean, it's not our age. It's just how it happens. You know, you start the 10-year-old who then brings their 4-year-old who then brings their 2-year-old, and before you know, you're teaching 3 generations. Well, thank you, everyone. Oh, yes, yes.
I just want to say from the mother, you know, part of things, I've been coming here like for 12, maybe, years. I saw Sam running there, for some years. And I just want to thank you very, very much, because like Carrie said, it's just like you're going home again. Very inspired to keep working on with
Thank you
kids.
so much. And well, going home so inspired. And then this is the double whammy of him going to Mexico and working with your kids there. And me too, and that's like been so special to watch them blossom.
It's been great.
Right.
Great, excellent.
I'm gonna start applause.
So you're all invited to Time for Three tonight, 7:15.